I think the traditional, if you want to say traditional media, I'm not sure, Pete, that it's fallen out of favor. I just think it has become one of several different alternatives. And so, the traditional CBSs and NBCs do a great job, and it targets a demographic that is, a little bit older and more traditional and watches their sporting events, on mainstream linear TV, where the growth of sports viewership is converting, the streaming part, and how you figure out, what are the total contributions to viewership come from so many different sources today and resonate with different constituencies today. I think it's just a proliferation of where the sports are being covered that might give you or give one the opinion that people are leaving linear TV. Well, they either are leaving it for other platforms or they never got to it because they can pick it up on other platforms.
Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of the Golf 360 podcast. As I was talking to today's guest, I told him that we have to go over his lengthy and illustrious career, high of achievement and everything else, because it is so impressive. But today's guest is someone who has been behind the scenes at the highest levels of professional golf for almost 4 decades. He started out, he was after school lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy. Thank you for your service, Bill. I moved on from there to vice president of IMG for 9 years. From there, became a partner in Marcom Partners for a number of years. Moved on from there to senior vice president of Octagon for a few years. And then last but not least, he is president currently of the Colvin Sports Network and also its founder. And I would like to give a big Golf 360 welcome to Mr. Bill Colvin. Bill, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Pete. That sounded like I was old.
That was not the intent by any means.
When you say 4 decades, I put it together pretty quickly.
It goes quick, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh, unbelievably quick. Yeah.
You've had quite the career from the military to the professional world, and you almost always, or it seems like to be always around the golf space. Did you set out to do these things or achieve these great things that you did, or was it just that you did what was in front of you, you worked hard, and then opportunity presented itself and you went from there?
Great question. The stock answer was it was all part of the master plan. And I don't think anybody out there would believe that because you just never know. I mean, when people say, hey, I planned that, there are people who do that, very directed, and they know what they want to do from a very early age. It reminds me of a high school buddy of mine. His name is Tom Hill. And Tom had this real passion for Corvettes, even in high school. And he would buy old Corvettes and he would put them in his garage, and he was a talented kid. And he would redo the body and he'd redo the engine and he would redo the entire thing and take this junk car, if you will, even though it was a Corvette, and he would turn it into this pristine car and sell it. So very entrepreneurial at a young age. And he had a saying, and every time you'd see him, I'd say, Tom, how's your car? He goes, get down, vet. He was just so passionate about Corvettes. And he and I both played on the baseball team, and he ended up going to in high school, and he went to Southern Illinois and played with the Salukis. I don't even know if your audience knows what a Saluki is.
I know this. I've had very good friends play. One played baseball, one played basketball there.
Well, then enlighten your audience. What is a Saluki?
I still don't know. I just know that that's the name.
Okay.
Isn't it a type of dog? Is it a bulldog?
It's either a type of dog or a turtle. I don't know.
Yeah, something crazy like that.
So he goes, and he didn't go to the same college I did. I went to a liberal arts school in Ohio, College of Worcester. I played baseball there. He went to Southern Illinois. He played baseball there, and I kind of lost track of him over the years. But in recircling back with his career, he ended up, believe this or not, he went to GM, and he ended up being the lead designer and head of design for their Corvette division. So that kid knew, Tom knew what he wanted to do from an early age. Colvin, not so much. So when you ask the question, was this part of what I wanted to do is be in golf? No, I didn't even know I wanted to be in the Navy until I was at home over break, and I had a conversation with mom and dad in my junior year, and they said, "Hey, you're kind of coming up against this here. What are you going to do with your life?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't know." And they said, "Well, we were both in the Army. The military was really good for us. Maybe military would be a pretty good, you know, career path, at least to get you started." And I said, "Yeah, okay, that sounds pretty good." And then I mentioned that to my girlfriend at the time, who became my fiance, who became my wife. And the next time we were at her parents' house, same question came up. And I explained, my mom and dad were in the Army, et cetera, et cetera. And, that's probably what I was going to do. And her father said, "Well, Bill, that's a very noble career for sure. But, gentlemen go into the Navy." And he was a naval officer himself, so there may have been some bias there. But, I knew where my bread was buttered, at least with his daughter. So I ended up going into the Navy in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in about my seventh year in the Navy. And the Navy's arduous. I mean, people don't really understand. I mean, if you think about it, even right now, as we're sitting here talking, and, our biggest concern is the fact that it's really darn cold outside and a lot of snow on the ground. We've got people in the Navy and the Army and the armed forces all over the world doing their jobs so that we can sit here in relative warmth
Mm-hmm.
and surely relative comfort and talk about golf or careers and have this nice conversation. But they're out doing some really hard things. And I don't think we appreciate them enough. And I'm not saying anything about what I did because it was a heck of a long time ago. But on a daily basis, we've got young men and women who are doing just great things. And at the same time, at that part of my life, having been married during the whole time that I was in the Navy, I was gone a lot. I mean, the last ship I was on was a Navy cruiser, and we would, the CG-28, the USS Wainwright, and we would operate with aircraft carriers, and we were getting moved around the world, not unlike, what's going on today. And the last deployment I made was 11 months, and I was out
Mm-hmm.
of home port 11 months. Married, no kids. But I thought, gosh, if I'm going to start a family, do I really want to be that guy, that parent, that dad? I didn't know. So I started looking around for jobs sort of on the side. And long story short, I was in the ship's library and I picked up a book, What They Don't Teach You at the Harvard Business School. And it was written by a guy by the name of Mark McCormick. And if your audience follows golf very closely, or if they don't, they might want to Google Mark McCormick,
Yeah,
because he
it's
was
very
really
impressive.
yeah, he was the founder of International Management Group, which, again, a long story. It's not what it was back in the day. It was really the foundational company that started the sports marketing industry in a more formal and organized and commercial way. And I read it and I was, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Um, he's talking about all the people that he represented, Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player, and the events that he did. And I was like, as a sports person, I was like blown away. So I get back on shore and I go home, and I went to Hillary, my wife, and I said, "Hey, have you ever heard of this company called International Management Group?" And she looks at me and she goes, "You mean IMG?" And I go, "How do you know that?" She goes, "Well, it's a Cleveland company." And she grew up in Cleveland, so she knew International Management Group. So as it turns out, my mother-in-law, and I'm reminded of this occasionally, that anything I have success about started with my wife and her family, sometimes on some contentious levels, but I won't delve into that. And so her mother knew a fellow by the name of Clyde Comstock, and Clyde Comstock was Mark McCormick's partner at Arter and Haddon, which is a law firm in Cleveland, Ohio. And that's where Mark started after his days at William and Mary, et cetera, in law school. And it just so happened Clyde was a neighbor of my mother in Florida. And so the next time I went down to Florida to visit my mother-in-law, she had arranged a conversation with Clyde, and Clyde told me again when I pretty much came to the conclusion, this is pretty cool to be able to. I mean, I had no idea that it was a job, really. It was just, hey, I was going to hang out with some pretty big names in the world of sport.
Mm-hmm.
So after that pseudo interview with Clyde, I delved into a little bit further, and it was serendipitous again, in so much as um, one of the women in my wedding happened to be married to a vice president in the golf division at IMG. Like, what are the chances, right?
What like Pulp Fiction, divine intervention?
Yeah, something. It wasn't like, hey, I was pulling strings. So long story short, very quickly after that, it was at a time where I had to make a decision to continue on with another 4 year. In the Navy, you did 4 years at a time. Yeah, kind of like college basketball these days, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, completely the opposite. So I tendered my resignation, ended up spending a couple more years in the reserves, but I tendered my resignation. And next thing I know, I'm One Erie View Plaza, Cleveland, Ohio, working for an international management group. And I was like, I really didn't even own a suit, and back in the day, you actually wore a suit, or at least the guidance was given to me, Bill, wear a suit for the first couple of weeks. After that, we don't care.
Seemed very laid back even for those days.
Well, if you can, I mean, I can't paint the picture vividly enough, so I'll just say it and hope imaginations can get to the same place that I get to in my mind. But when you go from an organization like the United States military, which really doesn't mess around, there are things like orders and compliance and accountability and responsibility, to this, what I would say, equivalent of Bad News Bears, with a whole bunch of people running around, just wild, wild west, just shooting at things, hoping to hit something, and then figuring out what to do with the bodies. I mean, it was it was such a departure from what I had known for my first, 8 years of employment. I So my first day, I walk in and, I get there early. I get there way early. I mean, the doors were barely even open, and I was certain the lights were still off most of the building. And I walk in, and there's a woman there by the name of Lisa, who was a receptionist. And of course, I introduce myself, and she talks and blah, 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 and nice exchange. And she shows me to my quote unquote office, which was this pseudo abandoned old boardroom that was doubling as a storage facility. And it had all kinds of magazines and books just strewn all over the place. And there was this long boardroom table. On one end of the table was a yellow pad, which was IMG's recording of choice. Everybody got a yellow pad, and a telephone and a pen. I said, that was my training. It was like, okay, go.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah, I mean, I picked up the phone. First phone call I made was to my wife. I said, Hillary, I may have made a mistake here. I mean, they're asking me to sell something. I don't know who to call. And I really didn't. I mean, I had no connection. I mean, I don't think I'm calling up like people in the Navy and saying, hey, do you want to get into sports marketing? I mean, who am I going to call? And I mean, I'm going far afield. I apologize, but that's kind of like that was probably that part of my story was indicative of how my career has evolved without much planning, to be honest with you. I don't know. It seems to have worked out, but it wasn't any planning, I guess, is the short answer.
What was so you go from not knowing who to call to becoming vice president of golf division. So you evidently sorted out who to call and what to do. What was after you call your wife, you make one phone call. Take us through the development of you don't know nothing, or you know nothing, or don't know even where to take your first step, what direction, intent, etc. To you're more or less going to run the golf division. How does that come about?
Well, just for people who might have known IMG back in the day, and just a little bit of a correction, I was nowhere near running the golf division. I can get into a little bit about that
Okay.
later. But your point about who did I call? I had a mentor. I did have one mentor there. He came from IBM. His name was Hans Kramer, and Hans, IBM was as close to the military as you were going to get. I mean, they had a structure. You had to wear a white shirt, you had to wear a tie,
You had to wear
and
tied shoes, either caps, wing caps, or
yeah,
whatever, but they had to be tied or lace, weren't they? You couldn't wear loafers.
yeah. I mean, it was all very buttoned up, right? Well, that was his background, and he was my boss, and so Hans took me under his wing, and just one kind of funny military to IMG story. So, like the first day, around 5, 6 o'clock, probably 6 o'clock, um, 12 hours after I got to work, went into his office. And in the military, when you leave the ship, you go to your superior officer and you basically request permission to leave the ship to make sure that he didn't have anything else for you to do that day. So I go into Hans's office and I said, "Hey Hans, I'm thinking about leaving. Is there anything else that you want me to do today before I leave?" And he looked at me kind of with this quizzical look. He goes, "No, no, no, go ahead. Of course, just go." So the next day, about the same time, I go into his office. I said, "Hey, Hans, I've got to wrap it up for the day. Is there anything else you need before I go?" And he looked at me and goes, "You know what? If you come in here and check out with me one more time, you're fired." So, and he said it in a nice way, sort of, but he did mean it. He was like, basically, he wouldn't have said this in this way, but he's like, "Dude, this is not the Navy." And it kind of took me a while to undiscipline myself in some regards, in the regards I hope that didn't matter, and keep the discipline in the regards that did matter. Um, but back in the day, I mean, our solicitation would be something like this. Hans had sent out uh, like 1,000 postcards to a mailing list that he had purchased. And these postcards came in stacks. And he gave me a stack of postcards. And basically, there was a product called VIP Golf. And it was basically, well, it was playing a day, a golf outing, play a day with the pros, VIP Golf. So he gave me stacks of these. And when somebody responded, my job was to call 'em. So he gave me some leads, if you will, and I just sat there all day long dialing for dollars, just dialing for dollars. But I did have a routine, so I had them separated into stacks. So East Coast time zone, Central time zone, Mountain time, West Coast, and Hawaii. And I started on the East Coast, started calling at 8 o'clock, went across the country, and I couldn't leave until I got to Hawaii,
Mm.
in my mind. At one point, I mean, the proliferation of area codes has gotten so big, and I don't know nearly half of them or more, whatever. But at one time, you give me an area code, I could tell you exactly where I was in the country.
That's a lot of phone calls.
Well, it was, but it also helped refine my pitch, right? I mean, 10,000 tries to get it right, and so and it wasn't like it was the hardest concept in the world. So it was easy for me to communicate it, and that's what I did for a long time, establishing that part of their business, which turned out to be a pretty lucrative part. Nobody was focused on it. Once it was focused on, it became, a pretty good revenue stream.
What is the biggest misconception that fans will have about the business side of professional golf? Because you were at the pinnacle at the peak time, and you were there. Obviously, as you just said, you were there from somewhat in the early stages before it became this. Even though it was international management group, it was sports representation at that point, at least in the golfing world, was not the biggest thing in comparison to today. It was minuscule. You were there for the growth, the development, the heyday, et cetera. What do people who are, let's say, they're fans of golf, they watch, let's say they're fanatical fans, they tune in every event to watch on Saturday and Sunday from 4 to 6 o'clock. What do most of them get wrong about the golf or don't understand about the business side? Because all they're doing is seeing the final product on television. You got Waste Management, Phoenix Open, you got the Farmers Insurance Classic, last at Torrey Pines. You got all these things, but you were setting those things up, if I'm not mistaken, behind the scenes, so that in advance, so that by the time it hit the television, it was set to go. It was showtime. But you were influential in setting those things up, if I'm not mistaken.
It certainly is a big part of, and setting it up probably can be defined as working with some entity that is integral to producing the final product, and it can be across a spectrum of involvement. It can be as simple as a hospitality buyer at a tournament to the title sponsor or the operational arm of the tournament. And we're involved in companies that want to play their part, if you will, across that spectrum of what it is or what it takes to bring a professional golf tournament to life. I think if one were sitting on their couch looking at Jim Nance and Trevor Immelman, and now Colt Knost has joined the booth at CBS, having them announce, they probably don't put a whole heck of a lot of thought into it, like what it takes. It is a vast undertaking. These are small to mid-sized businesses that are somewhere between 20 and $30 million in sales in order to bring, and now with the whole live involvement, et cetera, I did probably ratchet that up and say that they're probably $30 to $40 million enterprises
Mm.
that happen 30 plus times on the PGA Tour, happen 30 plus times a year. And so when you take a look at the economics behind it, somebody has to come up with that kind of money in order for me, you, your fans, golfers to sit on that couch and tune in for a few hours a week. So it's a big, it's a traveling circus with weekly stops around the country.
Yeah, Ringling Brothers might not be around anymore, but the PGA Tour and Live and Korn Ferry and LPGA, they have assumed that mantle or that banner,
And
as you
so,
describe it.
yeah, what does a title, so you have, in the hierarchy, the title sponsor, this week would be WM. So what does WM pay? WM probably pays somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to $15 million
Oof.
for the right to sail the sailboat. Then they have activation things on site in order to do what they need to do to meet their corporate objectives in terms of branding, online content, brand exposure. Television is part of that, is part of the initial title sponsor, but the rest of it is entertaining guests and hospitality and some of those other things that I mentioned. And so you can probably put another couple $1 million on top of that. So that's a big commitment from companies today in order to take advantage of being the lead sponsor of a PGA Tour event. And then sometimes you'll see presented by, it's a hierarchy. So if the memorial presented by Workday. Okay, so Workday is the presenting sponsor. That's a whole nother level. And then on site, you have all the hospitality. Again, looking at WM, I mean, everybody sees the 16th hole par 3, which is chaotic. To go back to your opening introduction of 4 decades, when I went to the Phoenix Open before WM was even involved in it, run by a charitable organization called the Thunderbirds, there was no 3-tiered ring of skyboxes around that 16th hole. There wasn't even one ring, but over time, the ring built out, became popular due to some students and their chanting and all the shenanigans that they do. And then the second layer, and then the third layer. And now it's the Coliseum of golf, right? So you have all those and that's not the only hole where you have hospitality, but that's the predominant one. So you have hospitality buyers, and then you have, again, WM is the ultimate example because, and I might have the numbers wrong, but they're not too far off. When on any one of the weekend days, you'll have 300,000 people at that golf tournament.
That's unbelievable, almost incomprehensible.
Well, what's if your viewers or listeners haven't been there but have been to a tournament, they'd say there's no way you can watch golf. Well, the fact of the matter is, in Phoenix this time of year, of the 300,000, I don't know what the number is, but 20,000 of them are on the 16th hole. The rest of them are hanging around the clubhouse.
I think because RBC, the Heritage here, and as you mentioned, presented by the Boeing is the presenting sponsor. And Harbor Town is it's tight. It's not very big. It's not very long. It's encompassed by houses. And I always laugh. I say, they get as many people on the 16th hole on a Saturday and Sunday each day that we get for the entire tournament on each day. It's mind-boggling.
It is, but you actually can see a lot of golf. All you have to do is go on the front nine and all the way up to like hole 12. So the first 12 holes, you can be up to close to anybody. I mean, it's on the ropes, watching golf. It's not a bad spectator event. I mean, 300,000, you'd say, oh my gosh, be like 10 times as bad as the Ryder Cup. No.
One question I have for you, and when we were in Orlando a few weeks ago, I said I had a few top 50 or Fortune 50 or Fortune 100 CEOs on the show. Randy Soma was one that ran JCI, it's Johnson Controls. Scott McNeely has been on. I played golf with Scott at Pebble Beach many years ago when Maverick and the rest of his boys were barely hip high. And now, Maverick's doing great things on PGA Tour. But I was always curious to pick their brain. I want to pick yours as well, as far as how much success at the top level would be considered talent, and how much is the team, the management, and the strategy that you all put forward?
My pause isn't for my answer. My pause is how can I be in the same category as Scott McNeely?
Well, yeah, no, I would say the common denominators are obviously extremely successful in the space that you guys were in. Tech is a little different. So tech, you get, I think their companies were billions of dollars. I don't know what IMG's market cap was at its peak, but I'm talking about people who dominate their space or in the top 1% of their space. So you see, or usually if you dig deep enough, you see these common denominators that people either didn't take shortcuts or the team all agreed this is what we're going to do. And just as important, this is what we're not willing to do to achieve these things. So I'm always curious to see what people who have been very successful and successful entities have done to achieve that. What was the mindset behind it? Or was it that the talent acquisition that you went after, and then did you bring that talent into and then give them the structure of the IMG system? I'm just curious to know if there was any, and if there was, what it might have been.
I think if I take a look at the golfers that IMG represented in particular, because that was where I was closest to the fire in that respect. During my time at IMG, the bell cow, if you will, initially was Arnold Palmer. He passed that along to Greg Norman, and he passed that label, if you will, on to Tiger Woods. So those three, I think you could argue, are pretty good examples of what you're saying relative to golfers who were uber successful. In each of those cases, they had the talent. They had the drive. If you get to any level, at that level, if you get there, no one is prodding you to be that good. You have talent and you're maximizing it, and you are singularly focused. And I think that's where IMG really had its strength, is to keep all the distractions away from their athletes so they could do what they do well. Arnold was a little bit, and Greg was more, well, also a little bit inclined to venture out into businesses. Like Arnold was very involved with all of his sponsors. That was one of his strengths, his personality. I spent enough time with Arnold Palmer that I can say this with a lot of truth, validity, I guess, better word. Arnold, I never heard Arnold say anything, even when he was a little bit upset to a lot upset, which is infrequently, by the way. I never heard him say something to somebody that wasn't perfectly framed to address the situation in terms of getting his point across without making the person that he was communicating his thoughts to feel lower than or bad or humiliated or whatever the right word would be. He got his point across, but he articulated it in such a way that he stood back and went, yeah, I see your point. It wasn't like it didn't create more contention or more
It sounds
stress.
like very, very empathetic in his delivery.
Yeah, but without being, but he got his point across.
Mm-hmm.
So that resonated incredibly well with sponsors, and those were generated for the most part in combination as a team. If you brought Arnold Palmer somewhere with his magnetism, people gathered around and wanted to be part of that. I mean, I used to joke, my job's really not, well, Mark actually pointed this out to me one day. I did a lot of business for Arnold Palmer, and I was very proud of that, and the numbers were pretty good. And Mark may be a little less tactful than Arnold. Mark said, Bill, if you can't sell Arnold Palmer, then you can't sell, you know, you can't sell anything. I was like, oh, thank you, Mark. Um, but that was pretty much true, by the way. I just didn't want to admit it. I mean, the CEOs, of United Airlines and Pennzoil and Hertz and all the relationships that he had, basically all they wanted to do is spend time with Arnold. So they would do endorsement deals and they would sponsor tournaments and they were great about that. So Arnold was a valuable part of the sales cog and Mark was the business side of it. So it was a nice tandem, if you will. Nice team. Good teamwork.
That I don't want to didn't mean to interrupt you, but
That's
and
all right.
that I didn't. That was part of where I was going to go as well is the talent that you guys are bringing in as far as who you're representing. But what I'm somewhat getting at, I'm more interested in a little bit, at least from the business perspective, is as far as top level talent that you guys brought into the company as employees. Uh, how much was it is this person's at XYZ company and they're doing these great things, we need to bring him in. How much of it was someone you brought in that was really really good at whatever they were working on versus it's a team and a management and a strategy and structures and systems and places at IMG that allowed you guys to become this behemoth?
It was talent driven. It was talent driven. And, Mark was, I mean, I won't say lucky because he was the hardest working guy that I've ever known. But, each of those three athletes that I mentioned were the bell cows. So everybody, if you were represented by IMG, that was kind of an ego boost to the athlete too. So that was the drawing card. Hey, I'm represented by the same company that represents Arnold Palmer
Mm.
or Greg Norman or Tiger Woods. So that's how the funnel, and just fast forward now a lot of years, that's one of the struggles that the group at what is the remnants of IMG today have. They don't have that calling card. They don't have the, hey, I need to be represented by IMG because the best players go there. That mantle of good housekeeping seal of approval has transferred to a company called Excel, which was started by three IMG guys. So the executives at IMG were really good the transactional part of the business and keeping the player focused, excuse me, on what they needed to be focused on. So it wasn't a plan, it wasn't a strategy per se, although the recruiting efforts started at a very young age. Hughes Norton, which we talked a little bit about it in Orlando, who represented both Greg Norman and Tiger Woods. I mean, he started recruiting Tiger Woods when Tiger Woods was something crazy young, like 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So the eye for talent is necessary. And then combined with having a strong, quote unquote, I hate this word, or this analogy, but stable of athletes, which attracted other athletes, was kind of the model of how they got the top talent. And that change has kept perpetuating itself until it was broken. And it was broken really when Tiger Woods and Mark Steinberg left IMG and went over to XL. And that chain's been broken now for a lot of years. And IMG, remnants of IMG are struggling in that regard for player management.
How did that happen? I was always curious in my back of my own mind when that the pivotal moment. But IMG had lost other top level players in the past. Wasn't Jack Nicklaus was there, Gary Player was there, as you alluded to. Why was it not the effect early on in IMG's growth cycle or life cycle that they didn't have the detrimental effect that it did when Tiger left? What would or would it have been the same if Arnold Palmer would have left? That it could have had a catastrophic effect on the company.
Yeah, if Arnold had left, I think it would have. There's other elements in play, obviously, too. I mean, when Jack left, I mean, you didn't have social media. You didn't have a lot of ways to weigh in, if you will. And so the echo chamber of him leaving was muted by the fact that the distribution of golf news and how it was distributed and who was picking up on it and how the media was covering these things, it wasn't nearly as prolific as it is today. So, and the explanation is easier. So when Jack leaves, you can say, well, you know what? Jack didn't want to be operating in the shadow of Arnold. Well,
Mhm.
that's understandable. It's not like IMG's bad. It's just, well, I kind of get that. And everybody's like, oh, that makes sense. When Tiger Woods leaves, it's like, oh, yeah, oops.
Is a very interesting dynamic that people sit there as I said, they're watching TV and they wonder how this happens, and then you got somebody like you who was there, watched it, experienced it, lived it. Just the small little things that you can say that happen without getting in trouble. I would not ask a question I would think might get you in trouble with somebody or get you a phone call after this came out. But it's very interesting how those subtle things come into play and can either make a company or break a company as it did for IMG, both directions.
Both directions. Yep.
What would be something obviously let's set the elite of the elite, the Palmers, the Nicklases, Trinos, Tigers, Normans, set them aside for a minute, and we'll take next level down or more of a journeyman type or journey lady type player. What is it that separates a marketable player from someone that has a potential to be to much more marketable or saleable? Or is it personality? Is it wins? Is it name recognition?
Winning on any tour these days in a consistent manner is hard, although Scotty Scheffler is seeming to
It's amazing what he's doing.
debunk all of that. But it's actually, using Scotty Scheffler as an example, because for every measurable reason that intuitively it should make sense, Scotty Scheffler doesn't have a great cadre, great meaning prolific, not that the companies that are associated with them are not great. I don't mean that. But, he's just not into sponsorship and he's into his family, into, with spending time with Amanda and their child
Mhm.
and another one and just a different approach. And, you can slide down deep into the reasons why, and a lot of it goes to like how much money he's making on the golf course, which was different, back in Palmer's day through most of the 2000s actually, relative to what they were making on the PGA Tour. So there was this need to go out and do Monday outings. There was a need to have sponsorship. There was a need to do that. But, to answer your question specifically, it's not wins. I can guarantee you that because it's so hard to come up with wins. And then if you bank on hiring an ambassador, which we do a lot of brokering, if you will, between brands and agent athletes, we do a lot of that. And if you're banking on wins as your measurement criteria, you're going to be disappointed a lot. And so we concentrate on the DNA of the player relative to the DNA of the company. And part of that is what you mentioned in personality. Every golfer has a personality. It typically is a mirror image one way or the other with the agent. And you have companies that have DNA, and it's our job, Colvin Sports' job, to make that marriage, if you will, and then make it work afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so personality is much more important than, at least in my experience, and I think we've done enough of this with success to say with a bit of credibility, that DNA and that personality goes so much further. I mean, take a guy like Joel Damon.
Yeah, he comes to mind right away. Is a very interesting dynamic of how you're going to work his representation and who you're going to connect him with.
Right. And he's a good guy to be around, and he has enough. I mean, all the players, male, female, that are on PGA, LPGA Tour, et cetera, DP World, they all can play golf. I mean, they're really, really good. The 200th player in the world is unbelievably good. Most people don't give that enough credence, by the way. So it's not about whether they can play golf. So they're going to wow anybody that they're in front of on a corporate outing or in their knowledge about golf, their backstories, et cetera, if they have a personality. And Joel Damon's a good example. He came to light, and I know you're a real avid follower of all these things. So, but maybe for some of your listeners who need to be reminded that Netflix Full Swing season 1, Joel Damon was one of the players. If you took a look at the players that they highlighted, you might have skipped that episode because like, ah, Joel Damon.
Mm-hmm.
But if you took the time because you were intrigued about the product, which was very fun to watch, you would see Joel Damon. And so where those players struggle is how do they get the exposure? And that's where the agent needs to communicate that to potential sponsors and people, where their strengths are. So you gave me 3 choices. I'm picking personality.
That is very interesting because when Craig Can was on, and he has Can Advisory, and when he was, I don't know if he still is, he was working with the LPGA Tour, and he was trying to get the girls and ladies to talk about what okay, you're leading a tournament, but talk more about what you're going to do that afternoon or that evening, or how do you get your mind to turn off of the sport and the competitive nature, and how do you relax, and what are you going to do? And I think, if I remember right, because it's been a while since he was on, I think he said, one girl loved to go out boating and fishing, or something to that effect. And he said, you got to talk about that, because I think people look at athletes and other, actors, actresses, people that they see on TV or wherever it is, and they put them on this pedestal, which we all do it to everybody, but they forget they're human beings. And I think the athletes lose that connection of being a human being to the viewer and their fans, or people who are potential fans. And if they can illustrate that, yeah, I'm a human being. I go through ups and downs. I struggle. I have hobbies I like and things I like to do and have fun. I'm not that much different than you, outside of being able to swing a golf club a little bit better. And I think that's lost.
So a a couple of things popped into my mind, Pete, when you said that. When I went to, not Hans, but when I went to my boss's boss, and I was looking for a raise, and I said, "Bob, I need to make some more money." He's like, "Make more money?" He said, "Bill, look at what you're doing. I mean, you're flying around on Arnold Palmer's jet, and you're going to golf tournaments, and you go to the Masters, and you get behind the scenes with Jim Nance, and he went through this litany of things that are really cool experiences." I said, "Well, Bob, I've got kids, and they don't care about that. They need a new pair of shoes." And I think that might highlight a little bit from a personal standpoint about, life goes on. I mean, things have to happen, and you need to do what you need to do. The second is I was at the Byron Nelson, and we were actively involved with a title sponsor as their consultants. And Adam Scott won. It was his first tournament that he won. And, he goes down the 18th hole, and he gets the check, and he shakes Mr. Nelson's hand and kisses the babies and blah, blah, blah. And, big crowds there too, by the way. And I'm kind of cleaning up the mess afterwards, which is what I was asked to do, so to speak. And I go in the locker room, and there's Adam Scott. He's just won his first tournament ever on the PGA Tour. And he's sitting by his locker, nobody around, changing his shoes. You know, Adam, how are you going to go out and celebrate tonight? Well, I think I'm going to go get, a hamburger at McDonald's and go back to my hotel room. So to your point, it's like we think, I think about team sport players, they just, the Super Bowl. Okay. It's coming up this weekend, right? And the hoopla that's going on in San Francisco and all the hundreds and hundreds of millions, I don't even know, might be billions of dollars are going to be spent on this one game over, one day. And these athletes out on the field and blah, blah, blah. You know what? When the clock hits 0000, they're going to resume their lives. They're going to go home. They're going to change out of their uniforms. They're going to take a shower. They're going to put their street clothes on. The winners are going to celebrate. The losers are going to drown their sorrows in whatever they drink. And then they go on with their lives because they're just people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us, a lot of people in my business, they get caught up with like the people who don't last very long in my business get caught up in all of the experiential things that you have access to and forget the business part of what needs to be done in order to keep you in this business. And I remind myself of that. Hey, Bill, every day you get up and you go out and you do your job.
Mm-hmm.
37 years later, I wake up every day and say the same thing. Don't take it for granted. Get up every day and go do your job.
I could imagine being that close to successful athletes and the most successful in the golfing world, that it would become very enchanting to start having too much fun with their successes, almost believing that it's your success as well, as you alluded to, that, hey, you forget that this is your job is to make sure that they have more opportunity based off how they want to structure their schedule, what they want in their life at any given point in their career. And it might be very easy to drift from that.
Well, when you do, you aren't in the business very long because your client is that athlete or that personality and they have expectations. When it comes to athletes, the ones that have successful marriages that's number one on their priority list. Number two, typically, is another family member. Number three is their financial advisor. And number four is their agent. And so you're in a very tight circle. What you do is you can't hide it very much if you're not doing your job. There's a very close inner circle of people around these athletes who are meaningful to the athletes. Your job is scrutinized. It's easy to see what's happening or not happening, so you better pay attention.
I would have to imagine that with the teams of people that golfers put together nowadays, that you have to have some, as you listen and watch these things and you hear the stories coming from the various tours around the world, because it seems to be the same. There's a trainer, there's a swing coach, there's a financial manager, an agent, and this long list of things. It's like at some point, all these people aren't going to agree, or they're pulling the golfer in various directions. Like, you got to do this media conference. No, you got to get to the gym. No, you got to work on your putting or your chip, whatever it is. And at some point, that dynamic has got to be very frustrating for today's. I would have to assume it's one of the bigger challenges for today's agents or coach or whoever fill in that space, as compared. Or am I missing it? Was it something similar back when you were doing it, that the challenges were different but somewhat similar?
Well, I think the complexity of the business has increased. To your point about, I mean, you wouldn't have a swing coach that traveled, every week. Psychologists. I mean, Bob Rotella was probably the first one in my memory that made it a job to be, a part of the teams for these elite athletes, the mental side of the game. But where the rubber really meets the road hasn't changed that much in this respect. If you want to get something done, you need to make sure the wife is okay with it on the male side.
Hmm.
Interestingly, on the female side, you really don't have to, the husbands weigh in less. I don't know what that says about anything. I just paused for a second to reflect on what I was saying and thinking, first time I've actually said that out loud.
Well, I think across the spectrum, whether it's an athletic family or just your average everyday American family, at least from the traditional sense. And I would say that the most of America still. Now, we'll probably get some kickback from the keyboard warriors on this one, but for the most part, in this country, the missus controls the finances or is in charge of the finances. The male is still the breadwinner for many families in today's world, although it has become dual income families. But I would say that the missus is making the financial decisions, or at least the final financial decision in most instances. That could be anecdotal on my part, just from talking to friends and what I see. Could be way off base, but I think in the traditional sense that's what it is. So I could see where on the LPGA tour, the players, i.e. the wife, is making that decision without a whole lot of input or required input from Mister.
I think I'd go back to what we're saying is that they're just people and they are in
Yes.
relationships, and look at one's own relationship with one's own spouse. And I think you would come to the same conclusion that we just.
It is a partnership, and I'm sure there's more. Not to paint a picture like only one person makes a decision, but it is a partnership, and there's, I'm sure, discussions and a lot deeper discussions than you as an agent or me as a coach would ever be privy to, and don't want to be privy to it. You get to a point, you say, "Hey, I can only get you so far in my what I'm good at. This is your family dynamic. You got to go behind that closed door and talk about it with your partner."
Yep. Yep, for sure.
What was the inspiration to go from what you were doing to launch Colvin Sports Network?
Well, there was a couple stops along the way. I and you articulated a bit of my career journey. So I was
Marcom
in.
and Octagon, yeah.
Yeah, I was. By virtue of the fact that I didn't get started in the sports business until I was older because of where I started with the Navy, I found myself in this kind of, I won't say bad space, but I'd say kind of a weird middle ground between being a junior person in age. I was a junior person by experience, no doubt about it. But I wasn't a junior person in life. When I was in the Navy, I had 20, 25 people that were working for me. I was doing what I thought was really pretty ambitious things around the world. I started a family. I had a baby. I wasn't hanging out at bars with the younger group that had come into IMG at the same time that I did. On the other hand, my boss, my boss's boss, Mark McCormick, they weren't all that much older than I was. So just in round numbers, if I came in at IMG at 30, most of my senior leadership was 40.
Mm-hmm.
And so I certainly won't say, but it's the only word I could come up with that maybe articulates what I'm trying to get across, which is I wasn't disrespected, but I didn't get any bonus points for having these other attributes that were above and beyond what the junior people had because they didn't have the experience. On the other hand, I didn't have the sports marketing experience. So I found myself in a weird place, and I looked at it and I went, I'm comfortable, I'm doing well. And I would have stayed there, Pete, to be honest with you, except another senior person left IMG and started a new business called Golf Watch. And it was mostly funded by a guy by the name of Jack Vickers, who ran a tournament back in the day called the International. And for some of your listeners, that was the Stableford
Yeah,
scoring system at
in
Castle
Colorado.
Pines.
Yes.
Yeah, Castle
Great
Pines.
event. Great event.
Great event. And Jack was driving down the I don't know which freeway it was, doesn't matter, in LA, and LA traffic being a mess as it always is. He noticed that there were express lanes. Notice you couldn't hardly. And so he started thinking, what if there were express lanes in golf where we could re-rope the golf courses, create a lane, if you will, a rope within a rope, and create these express lanes around the golf course and supplement it with unbelievable hospitality so that you had a place called your home clubhouse part. In the clubhouse, you had your hospitality. And then as you wound your way around the golf course, you had other hospitality skyboxes you could pop into. And you could have a concierge service and make hotel reservations and travel reservations, dinner reservations, get a massage, smoke a cigar, walk around, see the best golf in the world in a most luxurious way.
Mm.
and that was called Golf Watch, and he started that. He hired a guy by the name of Kirk Curtis, who was the head of IMG sales and a colleague of mine on the sales side to come run Golf Watch. And for a year, Kurt would call me. He said, he'd say, Billy, you got to come. He actually called me Willie. I don't know why. Goes, Willie, you got to come join me. You got to come. This is great. This is great. For a year, every day. I don't know. It's part of his routine. So he broke me down. And I kind of, at least in retrospect, explained it away that I was in this kind of chasm, no man's land. And so I made the leap. Talk about hard. Starting a new business. Oh my God. It was torturous. I thought I was working hard at IMG. This was a couple levels more than that. Trying to start something from just absolutely scratch at a time when the PGA Tour's main mission was to keep fans, believe this or not, keep fans further away from the action, keep the skyboxes away from the greens, keep the players focused on, the players would say, I don't, they barely wanted to play in a pro-am, let alone,
Hmm.
sign an autograph after they finished playing. So the PGA Tour was pushing all this away from their events and their players while we were trying to say, no, we need to get our fans closer. So we were way ahead of our time. Operational execution, really, really good. Sales, hard because nobody knew it was a new product.
Very difficult to create something. Looking back is always 25 vision, but looking to try to get people to buy into a new concept that they don't understand, but you can have a clear vision of how impactful this is going to be is sometimes the hardest part of it.
It was hard. And, it's not a hard, I mean, it really, Tiger Woods was coming on the scene. We're talking about the late 90s. So, when we launched our first event at the in LA at Riviera, I mean, Tiger Woods, I mean, our ticket was valuable. And being able to see Tiger up close and personal was big bonus. Our challenge, though, actually came from our partners at the PGA Tour, where we were an official licensee of the PGA Tour. But the head of championship management, and again, for your listeners, it was bifurcated. You had the people who were in the marketing department and they sold official marketing partnerships and licensing agreements with companies on one hand. The other side of the house was championship management, and they were the group that was running a lot of the tour owned tournaments. Henry Hughes was in charge of championship management, and the tournament directors around the PGA Tour get together once or twice a year for their annual meetings. And so the tournament directors are coming up to Henry saying, hey, what do you think of this Golf Watch product? And Henry's response was not consistent with the marketing department who had sold us the idea that this would be a good relationship to have with us and pay money to. Henry's response is, yeah, it's kind of unique. We're going to kind of take a wait and see attitude about it. So you've got the entity that you're doing business with on the one hand taking your money, and you have the entity on the other side of their house saying, "Hey, wait and see." And then they're the ones that really have the influence over the tournaments buying into it. So we could not scale our product across the entire PGA Tour platform. And so what I found myself doing is I'll never forget. It was with a company, Ernst and Young, and they have offices all around the United States, around the world, obviously. But so Ernst and Young, I'd go to New York and I would say, "Hey, you've got offices everywhere where we're going to be doing this Golf Watch product." And they said, "Well, you know what? You're going to have to fly to each of those offices and convince them on an individual office by office basis." So the bad news is I had to fly all over the United States calling one at a time. The good news is I'm still a platinum member on United Airlines. So scaling that product was hard. I spent a few years, and quite honestly, and people again may not remember the .com boom and bust, but we were kind of the precursor to that. Great product, great innovation, ahead of its time, and we had to actually shutter our doors. So with that, my buddy Kurt says, "Hey, Will, I got another idea." I go, "Okay, Kurt, let me hear this one." So now that you've,
How they crash and burn. Let me get back in the plane.
yeah, but he would say, yeah, but you walked away. Um, so, and oh, by the way, Kurt was a Marine guy who was he jumped out of airplanes. And I actually think he landed on his head a couple of times. I had to explain it. So we started Marcom Partners, and it was a boutique sports marketing company, and we did really well. And then, the four partners, three of them decided that, they'd made a good run at this and wanted to kind of hang up their cleats. And so we had a vote, and mine was the dissenting vote of selling, quite honestly, to Octagon. Nothing against Octagon, great organization, really, really good at what they do even today. But I'd already been at a big company, and I wasn't. I mean, I kind of knew where those warts were, and I didn't feel like I needed to experience them again. So I stayed a couple years at Octagon per my commitment, and then in 2003 launched Colvin Sports Network. And that probably wandered so far away from your question, I can't remember it, so
No,
I
that
apologize.
was a good description on how you got there. A lot of people in the mainstream of golf or average everyday American golf might not know what Colvin Sports Network is, CSN. Can you tell them that now that we've got to that point where you how you got to start it or why you started it? So let everyone know what it is, because very unique, I think, position in the golf world.
Yeah, so Colvin Sports Network, the reason it's called network is because I spent so much time developing my network aggressively. I didn't see in my quote unquote sales pitches, I didn't see why a company or an entity needed to go through what I did go through in order to get right up on step. All they had to do is join my network of connections and let me help them solve the problem that they wanted to solve relative to their investments in sports and entertainment. And we do probably 95% of our work in professional golf. So we help title sponsors, official marketing partners, brands that want to be connected to ambassadors in one way or another. We do event implementation, take customers to the major sporting events, et cetera, and have always kept it very small. And I keep it small because I want to have when I say this is going to be done, I just want to make sure it's done. And I want to make sure it's done to what I consider the best standards of what that product can deliver in the way that it was intended to be delivered. And one of the things of a knock, if you will, on some of the bigger agencies is that they make the same claim, but then the senior people walk away from it and go sell somebody else on the next project. And that's a strategy, and it's worked really well for them. It's just not my strategy. I'd rather remain small and hands-on and accountable for the successes that I bring to the table and make good on the ones that we might fall short on if there is that occasion.
What is your thoughts on it seems to be that if we take media as a as an industry, as we look at the major networks, their ratings are dropping, that they're losing favoritism with the general consumer, and things like podcasts and YouTube channels and all these things are taking off. And I listened to one the other day, and I just to kind of give this some context, you know, if you think of the two biggest male actors right now, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, I think they said Brad Pitt was worth something like $400 million. Tom Cruise was worth around 600 million. But Mr. Beast, who's 30 years old, he's half their age, and he's a YouTube guy, and he's worth $1 billion. So that's where I'm going with this. But for 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 someone like you who's looking to connect different people, do you see that the traditional media outlets are somewhat being pushed aside or not being utilized as much as some of these newer things like social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, which your business does very well in, Facebook, obviously X, and all these other ones, or is it still traditional media has some relevance? Because, and just to add to that, I think with the part of where this question come from is as the Golf Channel has had its challenges over the years. Its heyday, I think, maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and now it seems to be NBC acquired it, and it doesn't seem to be doing as well as it once did. So that just leads me to have the assumption that maybe traditional media outlets are not the medium to utilize when you're trying to connect a player and a corporation, or a corporation player and the consumer.
I think if you want to say traditional media, I'm not sure, Pete, that it's fallen out of favor. I just think it has become one of several different alternatives.
Okay.
And so, the traditional CBSs and NBCs do a great job, and it targets a demographic that is, a little bit older and more traditional, and watches their sporting events, on mainstream linear TV, where the growth of sports viewership is converting, the streaming part and how you figure out, what are the total contributions to viewership come from so many different sources today and resonate with different constituencies today. I think it's just a proliferation of where the sports are being covered that might give you or give one the opinion that people are leaving linear TV. Well, they either are leaving it for other platforms or they never got to it because they can pick it up on other platforms. So I've not read the statistic. I'm sure somebody out there has it. And, the viewership has to be combined amongst all the different outlets. It's kind of like the National Golf Foundation at one time only counted 18 holes as a round of golf to say what is golf participation. Then they started saying, well, wait, that doesn't quite make sense. I mean, we don't do that for like basketball. You don't have to play in a professional basketball tournament in order to be a basketball participant.
Mm-hmm.
And so they started to open up the lens a little bit in what is a golfer. And a golfer is somebody who might go to Top Golf, or they might go to a simulator. It might be, a variety of other ways that they are playing golf, just not on a regular, a regulation golf course. So I think the TV might, the exposure viewership might fit into that category a little bit too.
Yeah, I think it's also part of that recipe is the demographic. So you have the traditional golfers, which are aging out. They're getting way up there in age, and that grew up for the last 40 years watching. Not grew up, but their adult life was spent watching the network coverage. And you have all the younger kids now that are coming up, especially with the COVID boost in the golf industry. It's had a huge growth, and it really hasn't. It's slowed down some, but it's still growing. But all these young kids, everything's on their phone, so if it's on YouTube or if it's being streamed live that way, the good. I was just watching the pre-show of the Waste Management today, and or was it last night? I can't remember, but the good guys were on there, and they're having their own Arizona Open or something. It's going to be streamed live on YouTube. I'm like, Jesus, this thing is getting ridiculous. Not ridiculous in a bad way, but ridiculous. Like I'm part of that, maybe that old group, as everyone can see that's watching on YouTube, but follically challenged and discoloration or no coloration in my facial hair. But so I would be classified as the old group, but the new one, YouTube is, I think, a big one.
Yeah, I mean, we can delve into Bryson DeChambeau and
Yeah, exactly.
his popularity, which again, speaking, I won't say out of school, but with a little bit of lack of knowledge. But if you want to make an equivalency in golf, I'd say Mr. Beast and Bryson DeChambeau have some things in common relative to their viewership, relative to everybody else who's doing something similar in their spaces, right? Um, I mean, a couple years ago, I had no idea who Mr. Beast was, and I was like, "Oh, this is crazy. What is this?" So I looked into it, and it's amazing what he's doing, and
Yes.
and he's doing it in such a way. And I don't know why this just popped into my head, but it's kind of like the Savannah Bananas, and these people who are creating things that are different. Boy, I applaud them to be able to do some of these things and really do it in such a manner. I mean, both of those, Mr. Beast and the Savannah Bananas, do it at such a high quality that it's not cheap. It's not like a money grab. It's like the amount of money that Mr. Beast makes is prolific. The amount of money that he puts into every one of his quote unquote events is staggering.
Yes.
And so when you take a look at the net, it's still big, but he doesn't leave any stone unturned or is not. And same with Savannah Bananas. I mean, they are creating something that people want to see. And, at the PGA show a couple weeks ago now, the proliferation of influencers who are there, who are starting their own clothing brands. And I got to really, I'm either a few steps ahead or a few steps behind you. I can't, in terms of where we are in our life's journey. But I remind myself every day, you can't be that guy who's just sitting still. Your curiosity is paramount in you being able to stay in the game. You've got to be, I'm talking to myself here, you've got to be active in pursuing at least the knowledge about what's going on and be part of it, or you're going to be left behind because it's
Mm-hmm.
moving so rapidly that you've got to really spend a bit of your intellectual capital on staying current. And I try to. I do some weird things that I won't, well, they're not weird in a bad way, but, you know, I do a lot of research on what's the language of the kids, Generation Alpha, and what words are they using and why, and you start there and then work backwards into golf and about what the creators are doing. And I actually have a really good. I'm not going to say it now because somebody will take it. I'm sure with your audience being as big as it is, but I've got a YouTube idea that involves Bryson DeChambeau that I think would be a home run. I just got to go figure out how to get it underwritten. But yeah, the YouTube is the wave of the future, at least a foreseeable future, but that could change too. I don't know what's coming next, but isn't that the exciting part is, hey, what is coming next? And, it blows away my kids who are, a little bit older too, that I can stay current with it because they kind of discount people our age, right?
Hey, one of the common things that Mr. Beast and is it Cole is his last name? Is it Bobby Cole that owns the Savannah Bananas? Is that they had an equity position or took the position of long term equity. In other words, they took more or less all the profit that they could, pushed it back into the product,
Yeah.
you mentioned, and it's like they definitely played the long game. Let's build equity on this thing, and I'm guilty of it myself. I remember, I mean, Savannah Sand Gnats made sense. They were the old minor league team. I think it was single or double A ball, and that stadium has been there since over 100 years. And when the Savannah Bananas came in, I was one of the people that said this it makes no sense at all. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. What does bananas have to do with Savannah? And the yellow, are you kidding me? This thing is going to be a total flop. And shows you how ignorant I am of trends and what's cool and hip and what people want to see. I'll just stick to the podcast arena. I'll let the geniuses handle the take something from nothing and make this massive international, almost national for sure, almost international phenomenon on a baseball team.
But you know what? It goes back to your question you asked me about, hey, was this all planned in my life? I don't think, Bobby Cole and the Mr. Beast. I think, at least for me, and I've had nothing. Maybe we wouldn't be talking if I was as successful as either one of them. I'd maybe be on the beach somewhere. I don't know. Um, but you know what? They were presented, and they built it, and they grew it, and they took what was in front of them, and they maximized their opportunities. And to a much, much, much lesser extent, that's kind of how my career path has gone. It's just like you take it and you run. It drives my wife crazy. She wants a plan. I was like, you know what? We had this conversation the other day. I said, my plan is not to have a plan. When I have a plan, I screw it up. So, yeah, they've done a great job in taking those places to fantastic heights.
One of the things that we discuss in Orlando that I want to touch on before we run out of time, you're part of what you do is sustainable golf space. And I think that ties into a lot of discussion in golf, in particular the golf ball ruling, changing the golf ball to shorten, make it go shorter, spinnier, whatever they're discussing. I don't stay in tune that much to it. But that leads into the distance debate that's been going on for a number of years and length of golf courses and how much maintenance required. So if you can get into the what you're doing with the sustainable golf space, what it is, what you guys do, and why it's a benefit and should be of interest to many people that might not even notice, even though they're out on a golf course on a regular basis.
And thanks for that, Pete. My sustainable golf journey, if you will, started with a client request, which is what most of my business direction comes from. Talk to our clients, we hear what they want to do, what their needs are. And we had a client, Dow, was in the chemical industry. 60% of what revenues they have come from plastics. And we launched an LPGA tournament in their hometown of Midland, Michigan in 2019. We started working on the concept in 2017. And one of the things that was required is because of their sustainability initiatives as a corporation, they said, whatever we do, this tournament has to be sustainable. Well, to be honest with you, in 2017, I didn't. If I had a bottle or a can, I would stand between two receptacles for minutes trying to figure out which one to put it in. I had really, I mean, my kids encouraged me to get better at it, but that's where I was in my journey. So we started working to find the solution, and we did our research, and we came across an organization headquartered in North Barry, Scotland, called the Geosustainable Golf Foundation. And they're the preeminent experts as it relates to bringing sustainability initiatives to our environment using golf as the driver of it. So they work very closely with golf courses, golf events, and professional golfers to educate them on how sustainable practices can be more conducive in what they need to accomplish. So, in our terms with Dow, they wanted to have their tournament be a sustainable golf event. So, we learned a ton, and over the last 8, 9 years, we've become very active, and I've personally become very passionate about sustainability and the environment as it relates to how golf can impact that. And so last year, we partnered with them to bring their initiative from Europe mostly, although they have great relationships at all levels with all the major governing bodies, but they don't have the day to day feet on the ground, boots on the ground in North America. And they ask us to help them with that, to bring their sustainability initiatives to North America. And you say, oh, that's great, Bill. What does that mean? And what that means is, to your point about golfers going out on golf courses, most of us here before I got involved with it, I was the same. I'd go play golf and it was great. The grasses were all manicured and the golf course was in good conditions. That's about all I needed to know. What we're trying to undertake is making people more aware of what it takes in order for a golf course to survive. And what I mean by survive is if we don't take care of these golf courses in the right way, for a variety of reasons, including social impact about taking golf courses, which are a lot of times perceived to be a negative, and educating people on how they can be a positive to the community where they reside, where they are, to the golfers who play those golf courses from a variety of standpoints, including things like golf is healthy. Walking is healthy.
Mhm.
Healthy. Sustaining your health is sustainability. It's not just about water, which it certainly is. It's not just about fertilizers and pesticides, which it certainly is, but it's about how a golf course sits within a community and can be a good community partner to help increase the sustainability and the future proofing of this golf course for generations to come. So you might have a different view on it depending on your perspective, but if you are an avid golfer and you want your grandkids to play golf, you need to make sure that that golf course is around. If you're a golf course operator and you don't want the economics of running a golf course to overwhelm you, you need to make it more sustainable to reduce what it takes in order to maintain that golf course at the standards that you want to maintain it. And if you're a multiple golf course operator like the Invitas, the Kempers, and a host of other entities that operate hundreds of golf courses, the economic impact to your bottom line should be enough to look at what sustainability is. To your specific question about golf courses and length of golf courses and golf balls and how far they go, it all it it all goes together because I played Naples National this week. I don't know if anybody's played that, if you've heard of it, Pete,
Heard
but
of it, yeah. Yep.
it's a wonderful golf course in Naples, Florida, and they're landlocked, and they can only stretch it out to 7,200 yards. And so the sustainability of the golf course and golf equipment, it's more than just as I said, the water, but it's things like um, the golf ball going too far. Well, that's part of sustainability too, because you can't keep stretching these golf courses. This one's landlocked. You can't keep stretching them out. So there's different facets depending on where you are. It could be the technology, i.e. the golf ball. It could be the facility, a host of things that I just mentioned. And it can be just addressing the societal part of sustainability with the community and the health and provide. I mean, in LA, another good example, a lot of the golf courses that are there, they actually helped during the fires a couple years ago provide a natural break so that these fires couldn't
Mm.
continue to spread through a lot of communities because they ran into a golf course and it provided a natural break for the fire and allowed, the firefighters, et cetera, to contain that a little bit quicker. So sustainability is a big issue. Golf, I've been involved with, like I said, for a long time. this is a passion project for me to try to communicate how sustainability can really help golf, like I say, sustain itself, future proof itself. And so we're just this month, we're in February. So just last month, we launched a sustainable golf impact fund. And we're approaching high net worth individuals and corporations that have a sustainable objective in their corporate ethos, if you will, to be made aware of what we're doing and hopefully contribute to this impact fund with quite candidly, very modest ambitions. I mean, we'd like to raise $3 million before 2028 when the Olympics are.
Within a 5-mile radius of my house, there's over about a dozen golf courses, and the three big private ones on the corridor through Bluffton to Hilton Head Island are Colleton River. Most people are well aware of. They had the Wendy's, not the 3-tour deal way back when that place opened. So that was the most notable. You got Belfair, Berkeley Hall, but prior to those communities being built, obviously it was all open space, but it wasn't until about 15, 20 years ago that we started seeing eagles come down this time of year from the mountains, obviously the Appalachian Trail, Blue Ridge Mountains, et cetera. And, but this time of year, it started with one or two that were over, I think, at Berkeley Hall. I worked there many years ago in between my attempts to make it rich and famous on the PGA Tour. And then now that we see more and more, in fact, last time I played about 5 weeks ago, I was walking to the cart from the first green, and a bald eagle went flying basically 15 feet away from me right over top of the cart. And I thought, I just had to stop and say that this is really, really awesome stuff. And so I would have to assume that sustainability means from the environment perspective and limiting, let's call it urban sprawl or more development. No, I don't think anywhere needs more condominiums or more apartments or more anything. But does it also include, I'm familiar, and we touched on this one in Orlando, the Audubon Society, where does the sustainability aspect go into chemical use or restricting chemical use and finding alternatives for the maintenance of the course itself?
Yeah, it's yes. Biodiversity is a big one that you allude to with bald eagles. The Audubon Society and the Geosustainable Golf Foundation can operate in unison. They're not competitive, and in part of our communication, sustainability should not be an either or, and it shouldn't be, hey, I'm contributing so you can't, or I'm sponsoring so you can't because I need to have exclusivity. No, we're talking about something that should be politically neutral, and embraced by as many people who want to embrace it without any controversy or anything else. The Audubon Society focuses a lot on the water and on the fertilizer side of it, that part of the ecosystem of sustainability, where the Geosustainable Golf Foundation goes a little bit further, is more in the education part of what they're trying to do relative to uh, like the communities in which these golf courses are. So part of being a geo-certified golf course is that you have to have a legacy community project and it can be something simple like, hey, you know what, we're going to put a children's playground, on the golf course. And a lot of people talk about the high profile golf courses. Like Seminole right now is going through a vast renovation. And so if in Seminole and sustainability, everybody takes notice of it, but it's the other, 40,000 plus golf courses around the world. The groundswell is where you can really make your most movement if you get that information in the hands of so many others. And not unlike the athletes we talked about, Arnold Palmer was the bell cow, if you will. So if Seminole is the bell cow on the golf course side, and Rory McIlroy, by the way, is a sustainable golf champion. So we've got a sustainable golf champion in Rory McIlroy, and we've got golf events like the Tour Championship, which is a sustainable golf tournament, as is WM this week, the Dow Championship on the LPGA. So, those are sort of our foundational entries into this. And so communicating it to as many people, giving them examples, and showing how that they can contribute, is really our mission to try to take this to a broader audience here in North America.
I'll have to reach out to Steve Wilmot, who's tournament director here at RBC. I don't know, you might know him already, but he as what do they call it, elite level event now.
Right.
He might have gone to superstar status. I think he's the longest standing tournament director on the PGA Tour. So I mean, I've known him for years. I don't know if I can reach him still, but I'll reach out to him. I do know they do quite a bit of recycling as far as their contribution towards being as green as possible. But I'll try to reach out to him to try to get you guys connected if that might help.
Yeah, well, the reminder, I know Steve by name and I've talked to him many times back in the day. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I know for a fact that I'm reaching out on the other side to RBC as the title sponsor because they're very much into sustainability. Being a Canadian company doesn't hurt. And the thing with tournaments, well, across the board, one of the things that we do really well is commercialize in a good way, commercialize the opportunity and sustainability to be able to create sponsorship packages that not only demonstrate their commitment to sustainability, but can also support some of these initiatives that make it easier for a golf course or golf event to become sustainable.
What To get off topic a little bit as we're winding down, do you think golf, with all that's happened, as we talked about the YouTube effect, and as things change so rapidly with technology and everything else in today's world, and you have the live PJ Tour dynamic, you have all these things that are happening. Do you think golf is in a healthier place now than it was back when you had Arnold Palmer, Greg Norman, Tiger Woods in his heyday? What is your opinion on the health of the game and the industry compared to at that time?
Well, I think it's a bit of apples to oranges, to be honest with you. I think so. I don't know if I can compare and contrast to the time frames, but maybe just focus on the fact that, in my opinion, right now, golf is in a better place than it's been in maybe ever, to be honest with you. If you take a look at the National Golf Foundation, which I've always had kind of a little skepticism on their numbers, but now based on how their numbers are, what their numbers are comprised of, um, I think, in my opinion, the validity of them also has increased. So you've got number of golfers since COVID up, but in the past, that number would have receded. For years and years, the National Golf Foundation would say, hey, we've got these many entries into golf, could be a really high level. But on the other hand, it would be up, but these golfers are exiting for all the reasons that it's too expensive, it's not accessible, it's this, that, or the other. Now, if you take a look at the trends, it's continuing up even after COVID. So they're building on that really strong foundation that was helped. If there was anything good about COVID, this is maybe one of the handful of things that was good,
Hmm.
is that golf benefited from it being outside and people taking up the game. It's also spread across the demographics. It's not just a white guy's sport anymore. You've got people of color, you've got more women playing, you've got younger people playing. The youth movement is strong. So you've got a feeder system now that is not, it's built on a more stable foundation as well. So that being said, I think from like the feeder system of golf is strong. To your comment about coverage, you have so many more outlets. So viewership, if you were to assess viewership across every outlet, that's up. If you look at popularity, that whole live debacle was a blip. And I think that's behind us. I don't really know how much longer live is going to continue to be honest with you. Maybe on a pride thing and maybe with a checkbook that seems to be somewhat robust still, although there's some movement about reducing some of the money that PIF, the Public Investment Fund, is putting in. I don't see that as much of a challenge anymore. And then you take a look at the athletes. I mean, there's really compelling stories out there. I mean, Scotty Scheffler is not as outgoing as Tiger Woods was when he's dominating. The guy's dominating, and so people are tuning in. And when he was winning the Farmers, when did he just win? Not with what
It had to be no, it wasn't the Farmers. The week before in the desert, Palm Springs.
the Amex.
Yes.
Yeah, so he won the Amex, and the television ratings on Saturday, were when he was pulling away, market increase. So he's pulling some viewerships. People want to know what Scotty Scheffler is up to. But you have a great supporting cast too. And so I think the health of the players situation is great. And I think the PGA Tour commissioner is doing a really good job in making decisive decisions. He has the luxury of being an outsider. He's making good decisions about how to bring some of these players back from live, in my opinion. So I don't know, a little bit rambling, but I'd say, Pete, to me, it's in a really good spot.
I'm very curious about the live dynamic as I watch it, and it's I have had some posts where people accuse me, well, you're pro live and you're anti PJS. That's not true at all. I'm a golf fan. I was interested to see live come about for my own reasons because I remember going way back to 2001, and then where guys were complaining that they met their criteria for membership, but they weren't getting releases to go to Asian and Australian tour where they were going to get appearance fees. And then Mark Lai told me that that had been going on since late 70s when he was playing. So there were things like that were happening just having a competitor that made the PGA Tour step up and say, okay, we got to relook at how we do this. That model that Liv came out with, where you're going to pay this ungodly amount of money to these players to play, it's not sustainable. But what I think I see happening, and it'll be interesting to see if they're going to fund it for that long time. I think they're going after more international young players that won't cost them nearly as much, and they're looking at the world, like Adelaide, the Live Adelaide in Australia was massively successful. So my bird's eye view or 10,000-foot view is it looks to me like they're going after more of an international audience, the younger audience, where the YouTube kids are turned into YouTube, and they're going after younger names that might not be known in this country, but they're probably more well known in Argentina or Spain or wherever these kids are coming from. But it's interesting to me to follow that from a business perspective, because are they going to make it? I don't know. I don't think they'll be a competitor so much to the PGA Tour as a more competitor to the DP Tour.
I see what they're doing in that regard, and I wonder, is that the strategy or is that the only thing they can do?
Probably.
And making it a strategy. I still don't. I mean, think about week in and week out where the PGA Tour is seen. We talked a lot about that, right? Live, unless you have a television product that's compelling, and everybody that I've talked to, not just people our age, but my son who's 35, and I was on a phone call with a fellow who was 26, and I asked this question: "Are you guys watching Live?" And the answer is no. And so they don't have the younger crowd who are, and both of those, my son and this other fellow, avid golfers. They're not watching. I'm not watching. You might be watching. I don't
Not
know.
really. I went to the one in Orlando and I watched a few of them, but it's like watching a news channel where they're following the stock market. There's just stuff flashing all over this. To me, it was too much.
Yeah, and that is a common feedback. So unless they have a television product that people want to watch, and then they have to have names. We talked about, what makes a marketable athlete. Well, personality, not just can he hit the golf ball. So, they've got a handful of premier golfers on Live now, only a handful. I mean, if somebody can give me, I mean, that's like, I don't care about Sergio Garcia. I'm sorry. He doesn't do anything to move the needle anymore. He did.
Mhm.
So who do you have? So you got Bryson DeChambeau, you've got John Rahm, you got Cam Smith, and maybe Joaquin Niemann, who, give me the fifth one now that Koepka's on the PGA Tour again. Patrick Reed is gone, so give me a fifth one. I can't think of a fifth one, but I may be missing somebody. But I just did a LinkedIn post on, the official world golf ranking points, which for your listeners who might not be aware, those really are the criteria on, in a kind of 30,000-foot level, how players get into the major championships. They have to have so many official world golf ranking
And
points.
that was created by you guys, wasn't it? The IMG World Rankings will come out at the end of the year.
Well, it was refined by IMG. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Mark McCormick put his stamp on it, much to the chagrin of the other agents who said he had put his finger on the scale so that the IMG clients could. But that's something that's unverified. So you have those four golfers, really, and you take a look at what Bryson just said about Liv. He just signed a one-year deal, which was massive because he signed it at a time which was perfect for him. Koepka had just left. They didn't want to lose another player. Bryson's contract was up. He leveraged it into a massive one-year agreement. And if he never goes back to the PGA Tour, I think he would be really, really disappointed from an income standpoint, what he's doing on YouTube TV, like we talked about. He's getting massive numbers and money from that. He doesn't need to stay at Live either because his contract would have been fulfilled and he made a lot of money there. But he made some comments about Live that are really telling. He said, when I signed up for this, it was supposed to be 54 holes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to get the official world golf ranking points, it's 72 holes. He said, when I signed up for this, we were, going to be playing, more domestically. We weren't going to have to be traveling all over the world, but now we're traveling all over the world. I didn't sign up for that. When you're talking about official world golf ranking points, Greg Norman promised them that right out of the gate, they were going to get official world golf ranking points. That did not happen. And the points that they are receiving are equivalent to what an event that is held in conjunction with another event. So they're only getting half the number of points if they win a tournament. What do they call that, Pete, when it's two tournaments playing
Opposite field?
opposite field event? They're only getting half the points. So they're getting a reduced number of points on their official. So it'll take them forever. So I think Scotty Scheffler won 65 points or something for winning the Amex, and the Live
31, I think, is what they're going to get. The Live winner will get, I think, 31 points. And you don't get any if you come out of the top 10.
Right. And so whatever those numbers are, think how many you have to win, and there are only 14 of them a year. So they're not getting the points. And so Bryson's like, he's just showing his feelings about where he is relative to what was promised. What was promised isn't, and nobody likes that, right? Expectations are what they are, and they went to Live for a lot of reasons, mostly the money, to be honest with you, in my opinion. But they were also promised some things, so they got the money. And people who have a lot of money come to realize this shouldn't be about the money, but they don't really realize that until they take the money and go through and go, I've got more money than I never know what to do with. I really want to compete for major championships. Sorry, dude, you can't do that anymore. What?
Mm-hmm.
So they're disappointed.
Yeah, looking back, they might have been better off as coming up with a tour where the age is 40 to 50, because that seems to be the Ian Poulters, the Lee Westwood, Henrik Stenson, guys who were really not into playing much anymore. That they were, it was hard for them to. Maybe they lost their desire, because when you're 40 some years old and you're competing against a kid that's 25 and they're knocking it past you 35 yards, you're seeing the game is changing. They realize, okay, I can go out there and maybe if I pull it together for a week, I can win. But it's just a different game now, and they're kind of biding their time to the Champions Tour. And it's like, well, you're already worth millions and millions of dollars. Is going out to the Champions Tour to win $500,000 for first place really going to inspire me outside of going and seeing the guys that I played with my entire career? So I think those guys maybe made that jump for that reason. Maybe have lived focused on that, but then you don't have a business model. You just have as people call it, more exhibition.
Yeah, well, they did that. It was called the Senior Tour. Now
Yes.
the champions, PGA Tour champions, and that doesn't resonate with anybody. So to start a 40 to 50, that's not going to, you know what? It just is what it is. You play until you get to a point. Justin Rose isn't complaining too much about where he is. So maybe they need to invest and get dedicated and be Bernard Langer and Justin Rose and,
I would agree.
Go around in their RVs with cryo tanks and chefs and stay healthy and do flexibility and blah, 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 right? You make choices. Their choice was to not take
easy street, more easy street.
Well, and it's, because of where the money is in the game, if you're successful, that street comes up to you quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So
you have a few more minutes to wrap up with do emergency 9.
What time is it?
Almost noon.
I've got a noon call.
Okay, I'll let you. We'll do emergency 9 next time. We'll definitely have to have you back.
If you have me back, I don't know. Did this go okay?
I think so. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Again, from a business perspective of things that were achieved in your career and at the firms you work with that people might have wondered about and didn't have answers to. I think it's going to shed a lot of light on some things that's going to be a light bulb in their head, like, oh, that makes total sense now. Wow, that was interesting, etc.
So it's coming out Sunday. We were on for an hour and a half, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Does that run for an hour and a half?
Yes.
And do you see your viewership over that period of time? And do they tune in and then tune out, or how does that typically?
I haven't dug into how long they're staying tuned in or not yet.